get bored with too much information about Tolkien. Anyway, as you can see in the title, my work deals with the dichotomy between home and wilderness in Tolkien's Fellowship of the Ring. I analyze three different settings, and you will see which ones of them in the following slides. So, when we think about the works of Tolkien, usually the first images that come to our mind are the ones related to nature, to the natural world. And this is because, as Professor Alfred K. Seward states, in The Lord of the Rings, nature adopts an heteroglossic role in a Bakhtinian sense in which forests, rivers, mountains, and animals become characters that are not really anthropomorphized but represent powers that are larger than or beyond the human. So basically, what Tolkien does is in The Lord of the Rings, nature does not answer to the pre-established binary distinction between the dominating human and the dominated landscape. So Tolkien does not see nature as the other, and he sort of challenges the anthropocentrist perspectives that sadly are so common in both old and new literature towards nature, in which nature is seen as something that is to be praised and something that is it has a worth that is only true because the human beings endow it with it. So for Tolkien, nature has an inherent worth of its own that is completely independent from the worth that human beings want to endow with. Okay, so in this presentation, talk about the dichotomy between the idea of home, which is extremely important in Tolkien's work, and the idea of wilderness, which is also important in Tolkien's work. And I have used an eco-critical approach because both of these ideas are completely inseparable from the idea of nature, of nature and the natural world. So Tolkien's work overall deals a lot with nature, and that is why I have used the focus of environmental studies or eco-critical studies. So usually in these kinds of stories, we have this dichotomy comes very clear, because we usually have this first setting that feels like home. In the case of The Lord of the Rings, we have Bag End. And then the characters go into the wilderness and they go into the unknown in order to fulfill some specific quest. And through this dichotomy, through this transition from the safe place to the uncanny and to the mysterious place, they gain the ability, if we can call it ability, to feel sort of this kind of nostalgia. And the concept of nostalgia is extremely important when it comes to understand how the concept of home is elaborated. So these are just some of the books and some of the authors that I have used for my analysis. We have here very interesting personalities. For example, we have Liam Campbell, we have Matthew Dickerson. And the thing with these works is that, as Ratliff states in his essay, A Kind of Elvish Craft, Tolkien as a Literary Craftsman, he says that in Tolkien studies there is a sort of a growing consensus on many points, but much of this broad agreement relies upon assumptions that are based upon details that have long gone unexamined. And the problem is that we have these very general and very wide titles in Tolkien studies. For example, the ecological augury in the works of Tolkien, which is an extremely wide topic, or End-Selfs and Eriator, that is also an extremely wide topic. And I'm not saying that these research is wrong. I think that they are very interesting books and they are very necessary, but perhaps now is the time to get deeper into analysis and to try to make a more in-depth analysis about the motives in Tolkien's work. So that is why I have chosen three different specific settings to analyze that answer more or less to this dichotomy between home and wilderness in Tolkien's work. And also I have chosen to take the settings just from the first volume of The Lord of the Rings, which is the Fellowship of the Ring. So let's go with the Shire. The Shire is the home for the hobbits, as you all know. Um, so in order to understand the importance or the worth that the Shire has for the hobbits, we need to talk about these two concepts, the concept of outer landscape and inner landscape. There are many scholars who have talked about these concepts, but I think that Barry Lopez is the one that makes it, at least for me, most clear. He basically says that the outer landscape is obviously the one that we see, that we can perceive through our senses, that we can touch, that we can even smell. And while the inner landscape is the result of the interaction between this outer landscape and our inner values, inner culture, convictions, and all these kind of stuff. So basically, the inner landscape is the projection of the that the outer landscape has within ourselves. So precisely, this this so extremely strong inner landscape that the hobbits have within themselves when it comes to think about the Shire. This is what enables them, or what makes them feel so homesick when they depart from the Shire. So this sense of departure and nostalgia is always present in Tolkien's work. It is very present, even though it's not the subject for my analysis. In The Hobbit, when Bilbo is constantly longing for the Shire, not for the last time. And it's also present in The Lord of the Rings, when Merry, Pippin, and Frodo and Sam are always thinking about the land, about the grass of the Shire, about the hobbit holes, about the rivers in the Shire, and all these things. So this is a very nice quote that I took from The Fellowship of the Ring, in which we can see the deep nostalgia that Frodo is feeling. He says, "I feel that as long as the Shire lies behind, safe and comfortable, I shall find wandering more bearable. I shall know that somewhere there is a firm foothold, even if my feet cannot stand there again." So he does not really. He knows that he might never go back to the Shire, but he needs this place in his mind, in his inner self, to which he can resort to when he feels unsafe or when he feels sad. He needs this transcendental place. Okay, so this is the inner landscape. This is the projection that the Shire has within Frodo's self. Okay, so precisely this very strong inner landscape that operates within the selves of the hobbits is why, this is, for the hobbits, the Shire is completely inseparable from the idea of nature. So even the homes are built within the ground. Even the very grass of the hobbit hole, the very ceiling of the hobbit holes is made out of grass. So for hobbits, the idea of home and the idea of nature cannot be separated. They live integrated within the very landscape. And if you look at the Shire from afar, if we were actually able to look at the Shire, we would probably see no more than a few, clouds of smoke from the chimneys, but because the whole Shire is very integrated within the landscape. So the hobbits have this, perhaps when Tolkien was talking about the hobbits, he was actually proposing a very interesting model of sustainability. He was proposing a different approach to modernization. He was proposing a different look at progress, perhaps. So this is why I don't really like when people say that Tolkien was an anti-modern, and I have read that many times by many important scholars. And I think that he was actually proposing a very modern view in terms of sustainability, in terms of a future that was not based on pointless technocracy and industrialization. So this idea of the Shire contrasts very deeply with the idea of Saruman's imperialism. When Saruman invades the Shire with his troops, and when the hobbits return to the Shire, they at the end of the Return of the King, they see that the troops of Saruman are still there, and they have to sort of fight them. So when Saruman invades the Shire, he pillages everything. He plunders all the resources. He enslaves all the hobbits, and what he gets in return is this very dark and gloomy land that contrasts very deeply with the Hobbit view of sustainability. And I think John is going to talk about this later. He's going to talk about the portrayals of nature and industry in Tolkien's work, so I'm not getting deeper into that. And I really like to talk about these examples because Tolkien has often been said, Tolkien has often been said or been regarded as someone who was a kind of the pioneer for the modern green movement's agenda. And this is completely true. In fact, he has had explicit influence in many ecological initiatives that nowadays are still active. For example, we have the Middle-earth Eco Village in Vermont, we have Earth Haven in Nashville, and we have the Lothlorien Natural Sanctuary in Indiana. And these are just three of the examples that have had explicit and direct influence, and you can guess that from the very names of the places. So Tolkien's idea of sustainability has definitely transcended the mere literary sphere. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about a bit about the Old Forest and about the home of Tom Bombadil and Goldberry. Tom Bombadil and Goldberry are some kind of nature spirits that we don't really know what or who they are, because Tolkien does not tell us. But we can sort of guess that while Tom Bombadil is a kind of an earth spirit and a spirit of the forest, Goldberry is a spirit of the water and the rain. And these characters are really important because they act as envoys from the natural world that want to tell the hobbits about the tales of the forest, and they want to make them understand the lives, the inherent worth of nature at its best. So we can see this in this quote taken from the Fellowship of the Ring. As they listened, when Tom Bombadil is telling the hobbits about the tales of the forest, as they listened, they began to understand the lives of the forest, apart from themselves, indeed to feel themselves as strangers, where all of the things were at home. So when talking about these two characters, we are talking about characters that have a kind of an inclusive bond with nature that goes far beyond the normal one. And Tolkien uses them as a kind of a bridge between us, the readers, or the hobbits, and nature, so we can at least grasp this tiny part of the meaning of the environment or try to understand the inherent worth of nature. Tolkien does know that we human beings live in a cage of words, so we can never reach the true nature of the things because we always have symbols between us and the real things. We have language, but he understands the importance of trying to convey this through words in order to at least try to awaken this ecological mind on the reader. So that is why these characters have been of high academic interest for eco-criticism, because they provide some non-human perspectives that also provide a non-hegemonic view on the environment, and this is extremely important for Tolkien. So what Tolkien does, in a very summarized way, he makes an attempt to surpass the frontiers of their own perception in order to convey the inherent worth of the environment, not as the other, but as something that is infinitely more complex than that and has an inherent worth of its own, as I have been saying like 1,000 times now. Okay, so this is the last part of my analysis. This the woods of Lothlorien, the home of the elves and of Lady Galadriel, and the elven culture has been traditionally approached through a Christian scope, and these are just some of the works that have analyzed elves in the light of Christianity. But since I'm not a very religious person myself, and since I think that an allegedly Christian approach could perhaps hinder the possibilities for analysis, maybe for people from different cultures, of different religions. So I used a Platonic approach, which is, I think, is not that, nowadays at least, it's not that contaminated, perhaps. Joel Beck says something very important that I can relate to what happens when the Fellowship of the Ring arrives to Lothlorien. Joel Beck, in his essay Bearing Insight, Ancius Wisdom, about Platonism, about Plato, he says, through his emphasis on the interplay of darkness and light, Plato retains the pre-Platonic understanding of truth, which emerges as a result of an act of unveiling something and snatching it from hiddenness. And in fact, this is what happens when the Fellowship arrives. When the Fellowship arrives to Lothlorien, they have to go there blindfolded because the elves don't want them to see the path that leads there. So when they take the blindfold off from Frodo's eyes, he sees a place that is fantastic, is marvelous. It seems that there is, well, as this quote taken from the Fellowship of the Ring says, it was land where no blemish or sickness or deformity could be seen in anything that grew upon the earth. So with this act of unveiling his eyes, it seems that Frodo is seeing. It seems that he's gotten out of the cave of the famous Plato's famous cave, and he sees this very perfect place. Everything seems to be, well, he seems to be the true shape of the trees, the true shape and the original shape of the land, and he sees this place that seems to be a kind of an earthly Eden. And perhaps that is why this Lothlorien has often been approached through a Christian perspective. But what happens and what's the problem with Lothlorien? And I have to say, if I'm allowed to say a personal opinion, I am not really fond of elves. I don't really like them. And that is because I think that I've been talking about ecology in the previous settings. And in the case of elves are very ambitious people. They are very great, very fair people, and they are very beautiful, yes, that is true. But at the same time, Lothlorien is an artificial place because this perdurable beauty is only sustained by the magic of the ring, by the magic of the ring that Galadriel has. So perhaps, well, and this of course makes a very big contrast with the Hobbit idea of nature, and they are very humble people, very simple people, and very discreet people. So of course they are not like elves they are definitely not like elves. And perhaps when we talk about elven ecology, we're talking about a kind of ecology that has a highly romantic scope. It seems that the elves have this very idealized concept of nature in their minds, and they want to translate this into the physical world. And through this translation, they want to shape the physical world to the will. In a sense, they want to make it beautiful, but they want to shape it after all. So, in fact, when Lady Galadriel is tempted by the One Ring, she says that she would like to be the lady of everything, and she says that she would like to make everything beautiful and fair. But at the same time, this has a very interesting trait of imperial culture. And I think it was Gabriel Erzgard, a German scholar, who has an essay on elven imperialism, and he talks about this, about this idea of elves wanting to shape everything to the will. However, we could say that when talking about elves, that we're talking about an ecological utopia. They want to take the wilderness and make it so beautiful that it's not even real. But still, they have nature as their central axis, and in fact, at the end of the story, they are willing to give up the land in order for history to follow its course. So ultimately, we could say that elves are also people who have ecology as a central axis in their minds. And well, to finish up, these are some of the conclusions that I have drawn from this work. So, as I have previously said, the idea of home is formed by identity, by the identity of the individuals in relation to the environment. Okay, so home has always a component of identity and a component of environment. And since in the Lord of the Rings, the races of light and the races of good, let's say the hobbits, elves, even humans, they cannot understand home without thinking about the natural environment. We could say that the idea of home in Tolkien's work is linked with the idea of ecology and sustainability. And I want to repeat what I have previously said, that I don't really like when people say that Tolkien was an anti-modern, because I think that he was actually proposing modernization, but in a moral sphere. So he proposes a very interesting model, for example, in order to follow the drill of what I have been saying, of ethics of ecology. And in order to do this, to propose this model, he of course defies the established idea of anthropocentrism, in which nature is mainly seen as an object of praise or as an object of, let's say, exploitation of resources. And well, that was basically it. So thank you for listening.